State President welcomes Japanese business delegation. Vietnamese firms urged to utilize international trade remedies. Hello, it's good to see you again on another episode of Beast Line, brought to you by VTV International. You're with me, Linh Hương, from Hanoi. As usual, we start our show with several highlights in the economic scene from the past week. State President Trương Tấn Sang welcomed the Japanese business delegation during their trip to Vietnam on October 14th. The Japanese delegation attended the Japan-Vietnam Economic Conference on the same day. State President Trương Tấn Sang highly valued the comprehensive strategic partnership between the two countries, especially following the joint vision statement on Japan-Vietnam relations delivered during Party leader Nguyễn Phú Trọng visit to Japan earlier last month. State President Trương Tấn Sang also expressed hopes that Japan would continue to be a leading investor in Vietnam. Executive Vice President of Japan External Trade Organization, Yuri Sata, highlighted that the number of Japanese businesses wanting to expand investment in Vietnam has been on the rise. Japanese firms hope to assist Vietnam businesses in improving their competitiveness and quality of human resources. A ministry-level meeting between Vietnam's Ministry of Planning and Investment and China's National Development and Reform Commission kicked off in Beijing on October 16th. The Vietnamese delegation is led by Minister Bùi Quang Vinh, while the Chinese delegation is led by Vice Chairman of the Commission Ninh Chieu Cơ. The meeting aims to assess existing Vietnam-China transport infrastructure projects and to consider possible options for collaboration between the two nations. The two sides will also discuss joint renewable energy projects. Moreover, 3 new joint task forces will be introduced, namely for infrastructure development, currency collaboration, and coexisting maritime development. The Vietnam Investors Association and the Bank for Investment and Development of Vietnam, or BIDV, visited Myanmar, where they met President U Thein Sein of Myanmar. At the talk, the Vietnam's delegation stressed the role of Myanmar in Vietnam's foreign policy as an important new market. They also expressed their desire to do long-term business here. Exports and imports of the two countries increased by 30%, while Vietnam ranked 8th in the investment in Myanmar with investment of $688 million. President U Thein Sein said the country would create favorable conditions for Vietnamese investors in Myanmar in the coming time. The National Assembly Standing Committee reviewed a government report on the socio-economic situation in 2015 and forecast for 2016 on October 13th. According to the report, the consumer price index in the first 9 months of 2015 increased by just 0.74% on year. CPI for the whole of 2015 is forecasted to increase from 1.5 to 2.5% on last year, which is much lower than the 5% forecasted in the beginning of the year. The GDP of 2015 is likely to reach 6.5%, which is 0.3% higher than forecast. According to experts, these figures call for further readjustments in economic policies. Business website Bloomberg on October 9 claimed that Vietnam's GDP could grow by 11%, accounting for about $36 billion. According to Bloomberg, export turnover may increase 28% within a decade thanks to the TPP. Bloomberg listed 7 effects the TPP could have on Vietnam's economy. It said textiles and fisheries would see the greatest benefits from the agreement. They forecast export turnover growth for textiles and footwear could reach 50% within a decade. In contrast, the livestock industry and pharmaceuticals could suffer. Livestock farming will see stiff competition from foreign corporations. And the domestic medicine sector will have to compete with imported drugs when the import tax of about 2.5% is lifted. Those are what have made headlines in economic and business scenes in Vietnam for the past week. Up next, we'll learn about trade remedies and their application in international trade transactions in our crosstalk. Thanks to global economic integration, Vietnamese consumers have been able to enjoy a wide range of high-quality imported goods. Domestic goods are also given wider opportunities to enter some of the strictest markets worldwide. However, as Vietnam increasingly integrates into the world market, Vietnamese products are facing fiercer competition in both local and foreign markets. Trade remedies and technical barriers are allowed in free trade agreements to support local production. But how have Vietnamese firms utilized them? Let's find out more in this week's episode of Crosstalk. Our guest speaker in the studio today is Mr. Lê Sĩ Giang, former chief investigator of the Trade Remedies Investigation Board under the Ministry of Industry and Trade. But before we talk, let's take a look at the following clip.
Trade remedies are permissible import restraints meant to help import countries protect local products against similar imported goods. These measures are designed to allow relief from imports deemed unfair or to adjust from a surge in imports. They are often called a safety valve that allows further trade liberalization. In the modern economic era, there are three primary types of trade remedies measures: anti-dumping or counteracting unfairly low prices, countervailing duties or counteracting subsidies, and safeguards or temporary relief from import surges. Anti-dumping and countervailing duties are measures used in unfair trade practices to treat unfairly priced and government-subsidized imports. As a result, the added tariff is intended to offset the improper dumping or subsidy. Any allegation of unfairness must target an individual country. In safeguard cases, there is no issue of unfairness. Serious injury to local production industries might instead be due to overwhelming imports. This tool allows countries to temporarily suspend tariff concessions to give the domestic industry the breathing room necessary to adjust to increased import competition. The requirements for safeguard cases are stricter than those for the other two measures.
First of all, thank you very much for spending your time with us in our show today.
Thank you.
Could you provide an overview of trade remedy cases that Vietnamese goods have got involved with?
According to the data that I have until now, Vietnamese exporters have faced nearly 100 investigations by foreign countries. It ranges from agricultural products, industrial products, steel, footwear, catfish, and shrimp. I mean, the scope of the products are wide, and the number of the cases are high as well. Every single product and every single industry of Vietnam can face the investigations by foreign countries in any markets. Because we already experienced cases from the US, the EU, Turkey, Malaysia, Thailand. So I mean from America continent, Europe, and Asia. So we all have the cases in those markets. And it becomes now popular and common when Vietnamese companies go international. If they want to export products to other markets, they have to think about the risk of facing such investigations by foreign countries.
Could you tell us more about the specific steps or procedure in a typical trade remedy case?
The first one is when the domestic producers come up with the conclusion that there are some unfair practices, for example, dumping practice, then they will prepare a petition and lodge that petition to the investigation authority. So in Vietnam, it is a Vietnam Competition Authority. And then if the petition is accepted, then the case officially commences. Then the investigation process will have a look at it, analyze, investigate, collect data, and come up with some conclusions or determinations. Then if the determination is positive and the injury, I mean, the determination includes the dumping practices of the foreign companies, and then the injury suffered by the domestic industry, then the determination of the two are positive. Then the conclusion of imposing measures may be come up or made by the investigation authority. So in Vietnam, that is the Ministry of Industry and Trade, or the minister who has the authority to make that decision.
In 2014, Vietnamese exports were subject to a total of 13 trade remedy investigations by foreign authorities. Vietnamese shrimp exporters spent years protecting their exports from anti-dumping investigations by the U.S. Department of Commerce. Earlier this September, the department finally reduced the anti-dumping tax levied against Vietnamese shrimp after its ninth review of the case, or POR9.
R9 thì cái thuế suất chung đối với các doanh nghiệp tôm chỉ còn 0,93, nó giảm rất nhiều so với năm 2014, nó trên 6 phết. Thì nhìn chung thì đây cũng là một cái thuận lợi.
Vừa qua Mỹ họ cũng có một cái động thái là giảm cái thuế cho Việt Nam, cho một số doanh nghiệp ở Việt Nam, thì cái đó cũng là một điều tốt. Cái hướng mà con tôm Việt Nam mình sẽ mở rộng nhiều hơn.
The main reason for the cuts in the POR9 tariffs is that three countries, Bangladesh, India and Indonesia, were selected as replacement markets for calculating the costs of production and dumping rates at the same time. If the selected replacement markets had not been similar to Vietnam's economic conditions, the dumping duty would have increased. In the past, Vietnamese shrimp exporters suffered from high dumping taxes. The status of the Vietnamese market was challenged and even unrecognized by WTO member countries.
So what kind of major difficulties have been caused by these investigated cases to Vietnamese export items?
It depends on the export items. But the first reason, or the first difficulty that Vietnamese companies find in dealing with those cases is the understanding of the essence, the nature of the measures. Sometimes they don't really understand what it is. So when they face the investigation, some companies feel very afraid, they feel fearful. And they don't want to respond to the investigation because they think if I go into the investigation, there is something wrong. The second one comes from the regulation. Of Vietnamese context. Vietnamese economy is still considered as non-market economy by WTO members. Being designated as non-market economy, Vietnamese companies have a lot of disadvantages. When the investigating authority consider Vietnamese companies in that investigation, they don't use the price of Vietnamese companies, but they use surrogate prices.
Which mean from
third
companies
country,
in other countries.
Third country, another country. It is a kind of uncertainty when Vietnamese companies get involved in the investigation. And the comparison, when they use different prices, different data, different information, so they can use the high prices to compare with the low prices. So the margin, the dumping margin of Vietnamese exporters is always higher than those in the countries that granted market economy.
So what do local firms need to do in order to minimize the negative impacts resulted from trade remedy cases settled in other countries?
It is very hard, to be honest. The first thing is they should participate in the investigation. They have to cooperate with the investigating authority. Because when you cooperate, it means that you have the right to provide the information, to provide data, to provide evidence, to argue with the investigating authority. The second thing they should do is to hire a lawyer. It is very hard for a company to do by themselves because the technicality of the measures and the difficulty in preparing the responses to the investigation authority. So if you do by yourself, there is a high possibility that you fail.
Could you tell us more about the role of a business association in helping Vietnamese companies in dealing with these trade remedy cases?
In these investigations, the association should play a very important role, but unfortunately, Vietnamese associations, except some, cannot play that important role because of the knowledge they have, the experiences they have. They are not experienced enough to support the member companies. The second thing is, I think that comes from the nature of Vietnamese business associations. Sometimes some associations established is not on the needs of the member companies. So sometimes when they get into the investigation or get into the case, they have different interests. So they don't have kind of unified direction to go. But I think that there are some good associations in this world. We got VASAP, the Vietnamese Aquaculture and Seafood Association. They are very good and very active in supporting their member companies in dealing with those cases. But in general, the association still play quite a less important role.
Currently, cheap imported steel from China is flooding the Vietnamese market and taking shares from domestic manufacturers. To date, the volume of imported steels has doubled compared with the same period last year. This situation is causing severe damage to the domestic steel industry. Since the beginning of the year, inventory continues to pile up in this warehouse.
Chúng tôi phải ngừng hoạt động. Thì chạy một số dây chuyền chạy cầm chừng, có thể nghỉ đến cả tháng hoặc nửa tháng, và những dây chuyền nào ít nhất thì một tháng chúng tôi nghỉ đến 5 đến 6 ngày, dẫn đến tình trạng sản lượng sản xuất sụt giảm, doanh số bán hàng sụt giảm so với năm 2014.
Big corporations with large shares in the domestic market have also been affected by the mass arrival of cheap steels from China.
Cái nhà máy mới mà không chạy được full công suất không phát huy được tối đa, thì chắc chắn rằng nó sẽ ảnh hưởng đến cái hiệu quả của sản xuất kinh doanh.
With domestic steel producers facing such heavy loss in local market shares, the Vietnam Steels Association has proposed filing an anti-dumping lawsuit on Chinese steel. However, due to complicated procedures and requirements of the proceedings, the suit is still pending. Back in 2013, steel manufacturers in Vietnam succeeded in an anti-dumping suit against imported stainless steel cold rolling products. The case was initiated by two domestic steel producers, POSCO and Inox Hòa Bình.
Cũng rất may là cả hai đơn vị đấy là người ta là những cái doanh nghiệp mà rất có tiềm lực. Đấy, cả về nguồn lực, về con người, về tài chính, và cái công tác chuẩn bị tốt của họ ấy, cũng như là cái việc mà theo sát vụ việc từ đầu đến cuối ấy, đấy cũng là một cái nguyên do tạo nên sự thành công.
In Vietnam, what are the legal frameworks for preparing the trade remedy cases against imported goods into Vietnam?
We have three ordinances on anti-dumping, and subsidy, and safeguards, and we have guiding regulations. And we have even circulars and some of the guidelines promulgated or developed by the Vietnam Competition Authority. So in general, we already have kind of complete legal framework for Vietnamese companies to use when they have the need to use such measures to defend their interest.
And what are the typical difficulties that Vietnamese firms often face?
The first one is the understanding and the knowledge that Vietnamese companies in using such measures is quite limited. Even we already acceded to WTO 8 years But I mean, most of Vietnamese companies, they don't really have enough understanding of the measures. When they have difficulty in doing business, in development of their business in the domestic market, they tend to look for other measures before they use trade remedy measures. The first thing they think of is how to ask the Vietnamese government to increase the tariff line. It is very easy in the past to increase the tariff line to a certain amount. But when we became a member of WTO and when we concluded a lot of free trade agreements, there is some kind of bound requirements. I mean, the tariff line cannot be increased to the level that we want. And another thing they think of when they have difficulty in developing market is to ask the Vietnamese government to use some of the administrative procedures. And then if administrative procedures fail and they look for technical measures, then ultimately they come to trade remedy.
So what do you think about the current capacity of Vietnamese businesses in dealing with trade remedy cases in local market and also overseas market?
First, we talk about the capacity in using trade remedies measures in domestic market to protect their domestic industry. Vietnam has already done 4 cases so far. The first case is against the flow glass. The second is a vegetable oil. The third one is on the steel products, stainless steel products. And the third one is it's about the it's glutamate. Those information from the first 4 cases is a good news for Vietnamese companies. But even they have good, encouragement from those cases. But I think that they still find difficult to use. As we discussed so far, apart from understanding, apart from the technicalities of the measures, and the sentiment, it is very important. The sentiment that Vietnamese companies don't want to get involved in any investigation. But then the fourth one, that prevents Vietnamese companies from using it is the coordination and cooperation between between companies in the same industry.
Which is the role of the association.
Exactly, exactly. When they go into the case, they have to stay together and collect information and data and prove that they are suffering some injury. But it is very hard for Vietnamese companies to cooperate together in that case because they have different interests. So it's very hard for them to sit together. On the same boat to fight against the imported products.
So that's what business associations can do. How about the government?
The strength of government is to try to prove themselves to the business and association by taking action. When the first anti-dumping case happened, nobody thought about the possibility of the VCA, MOIT, can do the investigation. But in the 2013, when we initiated the first case, it is a kind of very big encouragement for the both government and business association, business community. Apart from that, they also can provide some more kind of trainings or education. They educate more business community, but I think it is a minor role because the government cannot educate every company and every association. But the big thing they can do is take action. If they are firm on that, they are confident, then it is a very big encouragement for the business community.
When Vietnam integrates into the global market with minimum tariff and non-tariff barriers, thanks to bilateral and multilateral trade agreements, Trade remedy measures are effective tools to protect local production.
Cái công cụ phòng vệ thương mại nó được sử dụng để bảo vệ lợi ích hợp pháp của cái ngành sản xuất nội địa, sản xuất ra cái sản phẩm liên quan, nhưng nó đồng thời cũng có thể ảnh hưởng lợi ích của ngành khác hoặc lợi ích của người tiêu dùng.
Though Vietnamese enterprises are familiar with trade remedy, those measures have yet proven effective due to various hurdles.
Khi mà đối với một vụ kiện phòng vệ thương mại chẳng hạn thì đòi hỏi phải có tính liên kết giữa các doanh nghiệp, bởi vì đại diện cho một ngành sản xuất. Ít nhất là phải đòi hỏi đạt cái điều kiện 25-50, tức là 25% các cái nguyên đơn đấy là đại diện cho cái ngành sản xuất đấy về mặt sản lượng, và 50% là phải đạt được cái sự ủng hộ của các cái doanh nghiệp trong cùng hiệp hội.
After years of experience with trade remedies cases from foreign markets, Vietnamese enterprises and business associations have come to realize the need to improve applications of trade remedy measures in their business.
Qua theo dõi thì chúng tôi cũng thấy được là cái đội ngũ luật sư và chuyên gia tư vấn liên quan đến vấn đề phòng vệ thương mại ở Việt Nam thì cũng đang được cải thiện dần dần.
Out of the 4 cases submitted for trade remedies by Vietnamese firms, only 2 were successful as the firms were large enough and well prepared in terms of finance and human resources.
Now, with a lot of free trade agreements that Vietnam has signed or is going to sign, including the Trans-Pacific Partnership, Vietnam is opening its economy and integrate it in a global and regional economy. So in that context, what do you think Vietnamese firms and Vietnamese government have to prepare themselves in order to deal with with this fiercer competition?
It is very interesting question. And it touched upon a very, very important issue in terms of economic integration. As you mentioned, that we already concluded in the negotiations of a lot of agreements, Vietnam-EU free trade agreements, Vietnam-Korea free trade agreements, and the AEC, ASEAN Economic Community, will be in place at the end of this year. And then TPP. So in that context, the competition between Vietnamese companies and other companies, either in Vietnamese market or in foreign markets, are very, very fierce, as you mentioned. And it is the time for Vietnamese companies to think about many tools and ways in order to defend themselves. To go international, they have to understand the rules of other countries. Mm-hmm. And in order to protect the domestic market, that is the first. And the second point, government should also play a role here. It's a bigger issue. In order to be competitive in the integrated market, the government should be more active in using such measures, in investigating practical cases. And if we go international, it's something that unavoidable to get involved in the investigations by other countries. And that is something that we can control. So we just try to be prepared for that, both human resources, financial resources, and the knowledge. That is the job of the companies that would want to go international.
Well, once again, thank you very much for spending your time with us in our show today.
Thank you very much.
According to the upcoming effective free trade agreements, Vietnam will remove from 80 to 90% of taxes on imported products. The threat of increased competition is real. Trade remedy measures are considered the effective tools for dispute settlement. Over 50% of the total cases heard by the WTO panels are targeted at trade remedy measures. So experts have suggested on some improvements in terms of policies to improve local business awareness about trade remedies, as well as to connect firms in utilizing these trade tools. And that just wrapped up this edition of East Line. Thank you very much for being with us. Repeats of our show are all online at vtv4.vn or youtube.com/vtv4go. From our team here in Hanoi,